today. If you have your Bibles, I'd like for you to open with me to the first verse that we're going to look at. We'll look at a couple today for the next couple of minutes. The first verse found in the book of 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 7. 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 7. Being that this is Mother's Day, we definitely, as we said already, want to honor, want to recognize all of the mothers, but we also want to recognize women, Wonder Women. We've chosen this topic today as a very strategic topic. We've chosen this theme as a very strategic thing because, as a matter of fact, when you look at the Word of God, when you look at the Scriptures, the Bible is very clear that we are fearfully and we are wonderfully made. As a matter of fact, why don't you just say that with me? Say, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Okay, now somebody said, why am I fearful? Do I have an ugly face? What is it? What's this fearful part of it? What does it mean that I'm fearfully made? That God made me with a fearful face or a face that instills fear in others? And basically what that means, if I can just paraphrase that, it means that when God created you, He created an awesome specimen of humanity. Women, when God created you, He created an awesome specimen of humanity. So look at somebody, just the women. I don't want the guys to say it today because I don't want you to get the big head. You already have a big head. But I want the ladies, just look at your husband or look at your kids sitting next to you or just a neighbor there and just tell them, I am, ladies say it, I am an awesome specimen of humanity. All right, because you are. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. And specifically in the role of a woman, we have to understand that God made you, God made your role, God made your office, this wonderful thing that without you in this world, let's just be honest, none of us would be here. So you are wonderful. You are that awesome specimen of humanity. But I want to focus on today. I'm going to kind of use the word wonder as an acronym. I said acronym. Acronym. I don't do that very often, but I want to use that word today, wonder, as an acronym. And if you're taking notes, here's the first thing that I believe makes you as a woman a wonder. Okay? And here's what it is. You are, here's the W, the weaker vessel. I didn't get too many amens there, and I didn't expect them. You are, as a woman, the weaker vessel. As a matter of fact, just so that you understand that I'm not giving my own philosophy, theology, and ideas, let me show you from the Bible where it says this. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7. God speaking to the husband, speaking to the men of the household. This is what He says. Husbands, likewise. I'm going to be reading out of the New King James Version today, so if the words are a little bit different, here's what it says, and I think they'll put that on the screen, New King James Version. Husbands, likewise, dwell with them, meaning the women, your wives, dwell with them with understanding, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered. Now, this verse throughout the ages, and I can already tell by the response that I got from a lot of the women when I said the first point today, that the W in wonder stands for the fact that you are the weaker vessel. This verse has been a very controversial verse. As a matter of fact, throughout the ages, all the men tend to bring this verse out as often as possible. And the women like to ignore it as often as possible. And in reality, the men like to bring it out as often as possible because on the surface level, this verse gives the appearance that God is elevating the role of the man while diminishing the role of the woman. But in reality, I want to unpack this verse just for a few moments and show you that God in no way was diminishing the role of a woman. As a matter of fact, with this verse, He is elevating the role of a woman. Now, I already know what some of you sisters in the Lord, I'm going to call you sister because some of you are giving me dirty looks. Remember, you're a sister in the Lord. You're my sister. God in no ways is diminishing. As a matter of fact, He is elevating the role of a woman by stating in His Word that she is the weaker vessel. Now, you may be asking and questioning yourself, and the natural question is, how is that? How can saying that I am weak or that I am weaker elevate me? Well, let me show it to you. As a matter of fact, this verse is very, very clearly elevating the role of the woman. Here's how. First, in this verse, God commands the men to be understanding. Another version says to be considerate with women as we live with them. Let me see the hand of every woman that wishes your husband or your children were just a little bit more understanding and considerate. Let me see your hand. Some of you are sure, should I raise my hand or not? Raise it right now. My wife is going to raise her hand too. Yeah. So God is commanding, and I want you to note this. This is not a suggestion from God. He is commanding the men to be understanding with the women as we dwell with them, as we live with them. What does that mean? To be understanding, to be considerate. It means that we will not be rude. Why you gotta be so rude? But we're not going to be rude. You're not going to be selfish. You're not going to look only for your interests and neglect the interests of the woman. You're going to dwell with her. You're going to live with her with understanding, with consideration. Secondly, how is this verse elevating the role of a woman? Look, God commands the husbands to give honor to their wives. What does it mean to give honor? Number one, it means to give them credit. You got to recognize, you better recognize everything that the woman does. Because if we don't, she'll let you know that you didn't recognize. Women have a way. Let me tell you something. I don't care where they're from. I don't care on what side of the tracks they were raised on. I don't care if they're black. I don't care if they're brown. I don't care if they're yellow. I don't care if they're white. Women have a way of letting you know when they ain't happy. Their necks do things that I'm trying to make it do, and it don't do it. You got extra joints in your neck. These little fingers wave, and there's a look. How many of you guys are wise enough to understand the look of a woman when she ain't happy? And you just, you know how to get settled back in your place, right? It's amazing. Let me just give you insight into my wife and I. It's amazing because she tends to sit in the front row, while I'm preaching in the service. I know before I get into the car after the service when I said something I shouldn't have said in my preaching. Her look says it all. And when we get into the car, she'll let me know, you shouldn't have said that. You know what that is? She's keeping me in check. And a lot of guys will not admit that. Let me say, I admit it because I'm better off for having her keep me in check. So you better recognize. To give honor means that you acknowledge, you give credit to what they do. And it also means that you give them praise. You give them praise with your words. You give them praise with your actions. You give them praise with your money. Hello, somebody. You honor them. So look at this verse. God has already said he's commanding the men to dwell with the women with understanding, with consideration. He also commands the husbands to give honor to the wives. And number 3, God tells the husbands that if they don't do these things, that their very prayers will be hindered, ineffective. What does that mean? God says in this word, look, husbands, likewise, dwell with them with understanding. Give honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel and as being heir together with the grace of God, that your prayers may not be hindered. This is what God is saying. If you don't treat your women right, I won't hear your prayers. So this verse in no way is diminishing a woman. On the contrary, God is elevating and exalting the role of a woman. But here's where the problem lies. Y'all were good with everything that I said up until this one little piece of the verse. As to the weaker vessel. As to the weaker vessel. And the question remains, how does this elevate the role of a woman when God is saying that she is the weaker vessel? Well, I believe that it elevates it because we need to understand what God really meant and what God was really saying when he says the weaker vessel. When God says that the woman is the weaker vessel, it means that she is the softer vessel, the more fragile vessel. Now stay with me. I don't want you to tune me out yet because it's about to get good, okay? God, through the apostle, is referring to the fact that generally speaking, listen to me, generally speaking, women tend to be more tender-hearted than men. Now, ladies, this is where you can just turn to your neighbor there, turn to your husband there and say, see, I told you. I told you have a hard heart. I told you. Generally speaking, women tend to have a more tender heart. They are more tender-hearted. And in reality, this is a quality that God created women with. This is not a curse. This is not a punishment. This is a quality that God in his wisdom and in his sovereignty created women with. Because they are more tenderhearted, listen to this, they tend to see the good in people better than men do. A lot of us guys, somebody does us wrong one time and we're done with them. And we want to say, you're dead to me. You are dead to me. But generally speaking, a woman is more tenderhearted. And she sees the good in people. And sometimes we as men cannot. Because they're more tenderhearted, they tend to be more patient. They tend to be more patient with people than men do. Let me tell you something. There's some men that because of their impatience, that because of their hot-headedness, they have done things that afterwards they regret. I mean, there are some people that have punched out their own friends. There are some people that have robbed their own friends. They have badmouthed their own friends. They have told off their own friends because in a moment of hot-headedness, they do these things that they later regret. But you know what? Women more generally tend to be more patient with people. Because they're more tenderhearted, they tend to be more naturally forgiving than men are. Okay? Now, I'm about to say something. And before I say it, I want to say, it's like the pre-show to the show. Okay? I want to preface it by saying something. Okay? Because I don't want what I'm about to say in a moment to be misunderstood or misconstrued or misapplied. Let me say this first. I don't believe that it is ever right for a woman to be abused. Okay? It's never right for a man to abuse a woman in any way, shape, or form. Okay? As a matter of fact, if you were to come to me today, and many people have, many women have, and ask me, what do I do? I'm in this abusive relationship. I would tell you, and I do tell you the same thing that I would tell my own daughter if she were to ever come to me with that predicament and with that situation. And I would say, get out. Get out as fast as you can. Run, protect yourself, protect your children, and stay away. Okay? Because there's no excuse for that. Everybody understand that? But now I want to say this. The fact that women are the weaker vessel, meaning that they are the softer vessel or the more tender-hearted vessel, is the reason why so many people or so many women stay in those type of relationships. Because of their tender heart, they are able to see the good in people even when sometimes it's not even there. They're able to see the potential in people when others can't see it. They're able to be patient with people, thinking and believing in themselves. He'll change, he'll change, he'll change. If I give him time, if I work with him, he'll change. They're able to forgive quickly or a little bit more easier, even if they themselves have been harmed or hurt. Now let me tell you something. I still say, if you're in an abusive relationship like that, it's time to get out. You gotta separate. You gotta make sure that thing changes before you reconcile and you get back with that person. But I also want to tell you this, that this is the reason why so many people, so many women tend to go back to relationships like that. It's because God, when He created you as the softer vessel. He gave you this tender heart, and you have an ability to see good in people, even sometimes when it's really not there. You're able to be patient with people. You're able to forgive them even when they've harmed you, when they've hurt you. And I want to tell you something today. The very fact that God gives you this title, this meaning in His Word as the weaker vessel, it in no way diminishes your role. But as a matter of fact, I want you to understand today that God put this in His Word so that we would all understand that soft part of you is a characteristic of the very nature of God inside of you. And the reason why God said, hey man, while you dwell with them, you better dwell with understanding. Hey man, when you live with them, you better give them honor. The reason why God put that is because that very nature, that very quality of God that is inside of you, that quality of peace, that softer side of you, it tends to lend itself for people to abuse or to take advantage when they're not right. And God puts those words for the men that surround you in your life as a woman to say, listen, you better not take advantage of that godly character that I placed inside of her when I created her. You better not abuse that godly characteristic that I placed inside of her when I created her, because that characteristic, that softness about the woman, is a reflection of the love, the mercy, and the tenderness of God in our lives. And I believe that as men that surround these women in our life, whether it's your mother, whether it's your wife, whether it's your neighbor, whether it's a sister in the Lord, it doesn't matter. I believe that as men that surround these women and they surround us in their lives, if we ever see somebody taking advantage of that beautiful quality that God has placed inside of them, or if we ever see somebody wanting to bring abuse to her life because of that beautiful quality that God has placed inside, I believe that it is the role of the men of God to stand up and to say, you will not do that. You will not take advantage. You will not be abusive, because this is my sister in the Lord, and she is wonderfully made. She is an awesome specimen of humanity, and she is a reflection of the character of God. So this verse does not in any way diminish, but I want you to understand, if this is what the Bible has said to you, then you need to understand that you are the weaker vessel. You are the softer vessel. What does that mean? That doesn't mean that you lay down and let people trample over you. It doesn't mean that you become a doormat for anybody. But it also doesn't mean that you start walking like this. You need to understand who you are. You are the weaker vessel. Listen, if you are a woman, there should be some femininity about you. And if you are a man, there should be some masculinity about you. And that's that. Know the role for which God created you. And God created you and called you to be. Here's the second thing. In dealing with the word wonder. Number one, we said that she is the weaker vessel. Number two, she brings order. She brings order. Okay? There's the O. Let me put it to you this way. In John chapter 2, matter of fact, you can turn there with me if you can. We're just going to look at one verse and I'll recapitulate the rest of the story that surrounds it. But in John chapter 2, we find an account of the first miracle that Jesus performed. The very first miracle that Jesus performed, he was invited, his family was invited, and his disciples were invited to a wedding feast, a wedding ceremony in a town called Cana of Galilee. Okay? During the festivities of this feast, of this wedding ceremony, apparently Jesus' mother Mary was comadres with the mother, the family of the bride or the groom. Okay? So she's in there, she knows the family. Apparently some information had come to her that hadn't yet infiltrated into the rest of raza that was there for the party. Okay? And so Mary, the mother of Jesus, comes to Jesus privately, discreetly, and she says, psst, because you know how mom will get your attention when she doesn't want to make a commotion. She has her way of doing it. Psst. She brings him off to a corner. She says, son, speaking of Jesus, right? They ran out of wine. And I can imagine that Jesus said, they ran out of wine. Shh. They ran out of wine. This is going to be an embarrassment to them. And Jesus turns to his mother, because your wives, your mothers, or the women in your life, they know how to get you to do things even without really asking. They hint. Right? And so this is what Mary does. She doesn't come right out and ask, but she says, Jesus, they ran out of wine. And then she stops. Meaning, what you going to do about it, Jesus? And I want you to look at the response that Jesus gave her. John chapter 2 and verse 4. Look at this. John 2 and verse 4. When she says this, Jesus said to her, woman, what does your concern have to do with me? First of all, let's just stop right there. Okay? If I were to ever come to my mama and call her woman, and then say, what does your concern have to do with me? Or if I were to come to my wife and tell her, woman, what does your concern have to do with me? Okay, let's just get this straight. In that culture, it wasn't offensive or anything for a son to refer to his mother as woman. That was in that culture. Okay, but secondly, look what he does do. What does your concern have to do with me? My hour has not yet come. This is what he tells her. Why are you bringing this to me? First of all, it's not my problem. Isn't that just like a man? It's not my problem. And then secondly, he says, and it's not my time yet. Okay? Now understand, this is Jesus speaking to his mama. He tells her, I don't know why you're bringing this to me. It's not my problem. And secondly, my time hasn't come yet. My time to reveal who I am, my time to demonstrate the power that I possess, it's not here yet. It hasn't come yet. Okay? And I want you to look at the next verse. Look at the next verse. Verse 5. His mother said to the servants, you know what that means? That means that she left the conversation that she was having privately and discreetly with Jesus, and she said, because he just told her, woman, it's not my problem, and it's not even my time yet. She says, okay, I'll be right back. She goes and she calls the servants, and she talks to them. And look what she says. His mother said to the servants, whatever he says, go and do it. I can imagine Jesus just, you didn't hear me? Mom, it's not my problem. It's not my hour. Whatever he says, do it. Mom. Do you know what Mary did in this instance? She took control of the situation and she brought order to it. Because here is a situation that was a disgrace for a family in this culture and in this time. This was a situation where the family of the bride, of the groom, whoever was responsible for this, was probably freaking out. They were probably panicking. What are we going to do about this? I remember in our reception, our wedding reception, we kind of had an incident that was similar. Okay, we had rented this hall, we had rented this facility. It was after the ceremony. We were in the reception. My wife and I are feeling like, man, this is. All of our friends are there. A bunch of church people are there. It looks elegant. It looks fantastic. It looks wonderful. We hired this caterer. They looked like they knew what they were doing, and in reality, they did know what they were doing. But here's what happened in the middle of the ceremony. They came and they started filling everybody's glass with what we thought was tea. Would you like some tea? Yes, please. And they started pouring tea. And I took a drink of my tea, and it wasn't tea. It was cold coffee because they had an ice full of cold, and they were pouring the coffee in it. And I remember us talking to each other, and we were saying, oh, my God, this is embarrassing. Everybody's going to have frappuccinos. It's supposed to be tea. And this was a situation like that. They were probably panicking. It was a chaotic situation. They didn't know what to do. Where are they going to get wine at this time, at this hour? I mean, they hadn't made preparations for it. And everybody's panicking and they're frantic. And Mary comes and she does not panic. She's not frantic. She's not losing her mind. She goes to Jesus and she tells the servants, do whatever he says. She takes control of the situation and she brings order to it. That's a gift of a woman. Let me ask you this question. How many times has a child gone to their father with a question? Can I go here? Can I have this? Can I eat this? And the natural response of a man is, go ask your mother. Why is that? Because men tend to understand usually that the woman knows what's going on. She's got a lot of knowledge. She's got a lot of knowledge of everything that's happening, and she's probably at that moment better equipped to make a better judgment on that because we don't know what he ate before. We don't know how much he ate. We don't know, how much candy he's had, how much sugar he had. Go ask your mom, please. Why? Because she brings order. In how many families is the woman usually tend to be the disciplinarian of the family? On the day-to-day operations of the household of the family, how many times does a woman tend to be the disciplinarian? And dad only comes in in the really big ones. Why is that? Because a woman tends to bring order. She brings order to the family. And let's just be real honest. How many of you today would be a mess, men would be a mess, if there was not a woman in your life bringing order to it? Can I just tell you something that happened to me today? I'm going to admit today, I came in late to church today for our first service, later than I usually do. Okay? Later than I usually do. Let me tell you why. Because I got up real early this morning. I was looking over my notes, I was studying, I was praying, real early in the morning. I got up and I started ironing my clothes. Real confident. Real confident. I knew what I was going to wear today. I put on my clothes. And my wife says to me, that don't match. She brings order to my life. So here's what actually happened. Afterwards, I come to church, and I still had the socks that I put on that matched the previous pants that I was wearing. They didn't match these pants. So she goes home, and she brings me my socks, and now my socks match. Look. Look. She brings order to my life. I'd be a mess. Here's the end. Another quality of Wonder Women. She is nurturing. She is nurturing. Isaiah 49 and verse 15. I love this verse. It's an amazing verse to me. Isaiah 49 and verse 15. This is God speaking through the prophet Isaiah to the people of Israel. Okay? Specifically to the people of Israel. And look what he says. Can a woman forget her nursing child and not have the compassion on the son of her womb? It's a question. Look what he goes on to say. Surely they may forget, yet I will not forget you. See, I have inscribed you on the palm of my hands. Your walls are continually before me. As God was speaking through the prophet to the entire nation of Israel, the people of God, the apple of his eye. That's what the Bible says of Israel, that they are the apple of God's eye as a people. In other words, he has a love for them. He cares for them. He tends to them. But when God was looking for an earthly example, something that they would be able to more closely relate to the nurturing nature of God towards his people, God thinks of all these different illustrations and examples that he could possibly use to give a better understanding for his people Israel of the nurturing nature of God. And the best one that he comes up with is the illustration or the example of a woman with her child. Out of everything that God could have said to demonstrate or to illustrate his nurturing nature towards his people, God uses a woman. Why? Because when God created her in her nature, he created her with a nurturing nature. Now, I have to tell you that I love this and I also hate this at the same time. Let me tell you why. Okay? Not so much now, but especially when my kids were younger. Okay? I would be outside playing with them. We'd be outside riding a bike, throwing the football, shooting basketball, whatever. One of them would trip and fall. And I'm standing right next to them. They get up. You know how kids do when they fall, and they kind of just stay there to see what happened. And then they kind of look up, and then you start seeing this thing happen. Their chin. And their eyes. And they go. And I'm standing right next to them. This is my child. And they get up. They look at themselves, they're dirty or they're scraped. And I'm standing right next to them, and they run right by me to go to mom. One day in particular, I remember this very clearly. My daughter, I don't know how she fell, whatever, she scraped her knee. She had an ugly scrape on it, right? It was kind of bloody and everything. And my wife wasn't there. So this was outside. I picked her up. I got my daughter. I picked her up in my arms, and I took her inside the house, and I sat her on the countertop of our kitchen, and I got a little first aid kit, and I started blowing on her little boo-boo. And I even prayed over her. I put my hands not on it, not to hurt her, but around it, and I prayed over her in the name of Jesus, because I'm a man of faith, right? And I prayed for her. And I washed it, and she's... and I'm washing it, and I bandaged it, and I'm saying, my baby, I'm talking to her like that, my baby, I'm making a fool out of myself. My baby, what happened to my baby? You know, I'm doing all this stuff. And after I bandaged her, she looks at me, and she's like this. And you know what she had the audacity to tell me? I still want Mom. It broke my heart. I needed somebody to blow on my boo-boo and bandage my broken heart. Why? Because as much as we try, and she's the nurturer. The woman is the nurturer. Here's the D. Let's look at this one. She defends. The D in wonder. She defends. I have heard, and I won't mention any names, but there's some sisters from our church that they refer to themselves as mama bears, lionesses. And we really haven't seen what you're capable of until somebody messes with your kid. As a matter of fact, one evening, several years ago, my wife and I were in our living room downstairs. It was late at night already, maybe 10, not that late, but about 10 o'clock or so at night. We were watching the news. And we're relaxing. Okay? It's a nice, quiet evening at home, enjoying her company as I love to do so often. And all of a sudden, as we're enjoying ourselves, it's quiet, watching the news. The children are asleep already. I hear this horrendous scream from outside of our house, somewhere else. And it's a scream of a woman, and she goes, "Ah!" And then she starts saying, "That's my baby! That's my baby! That's my baby!" Am I lying? I'm telling the truth. She and I were on the couch, and we looked at each other like, oh my God, some kid is getting kidnapped. I jumped up out of the sofa. Okay? I jumped up out of my sofa. I ran through that. I ran outside thinking that somebody was kidnapping my neighbor's kid. Right? And I run out there, and I get to their house. I'm trying to see where they're, and I finally see some movement, right? Because it was all dark. I see some movement in one of the houses, and I run to the house, and I'm there. I'm ready to tackle somebody. I'm ready to take somebody out. My heart's pumping, the adrenaline's pumping, and I'm still hearing, "That's my baby! That's my baby!" And this guy comes stumbling out of the house. Well, it's my neighbor. The one who lives there. He's bleeding. He's all scratched up. Like a lioness really got to him. He's the father of the child that lives there. And I said, "Bro, what happened? Did somebody try to take your kid?" He said, "No, that was my wife. She was going after me because I started spanking the kid." I said, "Oh my God." Remember that? A woman defends. You know, there's a story in the Bible where a mom of two of the disciples of Jesus comes to Jesus. And she says, "Master, I'd like to have a word with you." Jesus, being polite and nice, says, "Okay, let's talk." She says, "I'd like to ask you a favor." He says, "Ask." "When you get into your kingdom," she says, "I'd like for both of my sons to sit at your side, one at the right and one at the left." You know what she was asking him? What she had the gall and the audacity and the nerve to ask him? "I want one of them to be the vice president and the other one to be the Secretary of State." Forget all the other ones. Get my two boys to be those. You know what she did? She was bringing her case before the Lord in defense of her sons. You know what the honest to God truth is? That many of you that are here today in the house of God, enjoying the presence of God, hearing the word of God, some of you, many of you would never have been here had it not been for the prayers of a woman in your life that was calling out your name before God, defending you before the presence of God. And I'd also like to say this. You Wonder Women that are here, there's people in your life that are not here today Some of them because they're rebellious. Some of them because they're hurt and they're damaged and they blame God and they don't want to have anything to do with God. Some of them because they think that they're just enjoying life and they feel like they have no real need for God. The fact of the matter is that you need to understand that you are the defender. That you are the one who has the privilege and who has the right to go before God and give a defense for your family, for your children, for your parents, for your brothers, for your sisters. When God created you as a woman, He created you as a defender. Understand your role and take it. And I'm not saying that everybody that comes your way, you got to go like this. But what I am saying is that when opposition, when challenges, when struggles come your way, get like this and understand that you have a one-on-one connection with the Holy Spirit of God and He hears your prayers because He recognizes you as a defender. As a defender. She is a defender. Wonder. What makes a Wonder Woman? Here's the E. I like this one. She has elastic powers. Every superhero has to have a power. And our Wonder Women have elastic powers. I'm not saying that when you have babies, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about that. Okay? That was one where I got the look where she said, you shouldn't have said that. I'll hear about that later. This is what I mean by elastic powers. I don't know how y'all do it. But you ladies can be in multiple places at one time. You just stretch everywhere. Your presence, your influence, your voice, it stretches everywhere. You know what? My mom is so elastic that I have been out of my house now for 15, 16 years or so with my own wife, and I still hear her voice in my head. She's that elastic. And y'all multitask. Y'all do all these things. You're everywhere at one time. You have these elastic powers. That's for you that was falling asleep. Wake up. You have these elastic powers. You're everywhere. You just stretch. And when we think that you're not going to be able to come through, somehow, some way, you come through. I don't know how y'all do it. Sometimes we go over to a house, and the woman, she went to work that day, and she's only been home for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and we're there visiting a family, or we're there with family members. She's only been there for a little bit of time, and there is this 7-course meal completely prepared. I don't know how she did it in 30, 40 minutes, but she is an elastic woman, and she did all sorts of things at once. It's a superpower. God created you with that ability. Hey, you try to get one of us guys, one of us fellas to do 2 or 3 things at one time. I'm just telling you right now, I can barely walk and chew gum at the same time. But you have elastic powers, and here's the R. She reassures others. As a woman, as a Wonder Woman, you have the ability, this God-given ability to reassure others. Your presence, listen, you need to know this. Woman, your presence is a reassuring presence. Your voice is a reassuring voice. Your touch is a reassuring touch. I learned something crazy several years ago. I read it. That when a child is first born, listen to this. In order for that child to feel safe, secure, well, a newborn child must hear the voice of its mother. Listen to this. About 3,000 times a day. In order for that child to feel secure. Why is that? Because the voice of a woman is reassuring. Her presence is reassuring. A while back, my wife and I were confronted with a situation. It was kind of difficult. Have you ever had one of those situations where you don't really know what the right thing to do is, but you've got to make a decision? right? You could go either way, and it's kind of confusing. It's a very complex issue, and you don't know exactly what the right thing is to do, but you've just got to make a judgment call, and you make that judgment call. We were in a situation like that. It was difficult. We didn't know exactly what the right thing to do was, and yet we were called upon to do that. We were called upon to make a decision. Now look, this is what happened. In that moment, she looked at me to make a decision, and I made a decision. Okay? Not knowing if it was the right decision, not knowing what the full consequences would be, but a judgment call had to be made, and I made a judgment. I made a decision. And she didn't say anything about it. Right? We went on. So I go on. A couple of days later, the weight of the decision is weighing on me. The weight of the decision is weighing on me. And I'm thinking about it. Did I do the right thing? And those questions are haunting me. I don't know if I did the wrong thing. There's repercussions that can take place. There's things that can happen as a result of what I chose, but I felt in the moment that it was the right thing to do. I'm not sure now if it was the right thing to do. And it was weighing on me. And I remember that I was driving home one day, and I had been praying. I had been talking to the Lord, and I was saying, God, you got to help me. I made a decision. I thought in the moment that it was the right decision. I don't know about it now, God. There's so many things that can happen. It can go so many different ways. Did I do the right thing? Did I say the right thing? And I called her while I was driving. And it was before the law passed, so I wasn't breaking the law, okay? In case you were wondering. I called her while I was driving. I actually pulled over for a few moments. I remember exactly where I was. And I called her. And I started telling her, this is what I'm feeling. I don't know if I did the right thing. I don't know if we were right. I'm thinking about it now. And so this can go so many different ways, and some of them are not good. And I don't know if it was the right thing to do. It's dangerous. It's risky. And she listened to me, and then this is simply what she said. She said this, I am 100% in agreement with you. And whatever happens, we'll deal with it together. The moment she said, let me tell you something. I felt like I was carrying the weight of the world in that moment. But when she said that, the weight of the world came off of my shoulders because she gave me a reassuring word with her reassuring voice that said, I'm with you. When she said that, I felt like, hey, bring it on. Whatever happens, we're going to face it together. I've got this. She gave me a strength. She gave me an assurance. She made me get out of it. And I since that day, I have not questioned my decision. It no longer enters my mind if I did the right thing or I didn't do the right thing. If whatever happens, happens. But we're going to face it together. And all it took was for her to reassure me that that was the case. And I'm good. You know why? Because as a Wonder Woman, you have the ability to reassure. Your presence, your voice, your touch is a reassuring touch. Can I tell you something? Don't be afraid to use it. There are many people that are hurting. Understand your role as a reassuring woman. Comfort them. Encourage them. Support them. Uplift them. Because when you speak in that gift of a reassuring person, God will back you up and God will honor you and God will use you for His glory and for His honor. Because of these reasons and because of so many more, today you are a Wonder Woman. And we acknowledge you and we thank you.